Good Sunday morning, everybody. And we're still carrying forward the Easter theme of resurrection, of seeing with new eyes, and being able to see in the sense of understanding who Jesus was and understanding his teaching, understanding his way of life, or at least being able to see it. Mentonia. People's eyes were open. They had a big change of mind. Now I want to use ordinary things today. First we take a look at the gospel to really get a handle on what I'm talking about. You remember a couple months ago I talked of mentonia. That word means a change of mind. You see the world differently. And you see it differently in the sense that you see it as God sees it. That's what it means. It doesn't mean you just change your mind. It means you change your way of seeing. And the question is not what you see, it's how you see. And when people experience mentonia, then they change their way of seeing reality. And of course, it's a very specific word used in the scriptures, meaning you see God, you see life, people, creation, you see it as God sees it. And that's critical to what I'm talking about this morning, that we keep in mind that's it. The second thing that's critical to metanoia and seeing as God sees it is, excuse me, evolution. Now, we are an evolving species, and I think it's easy for us to see that we're seeing the world differently than our grandfathers did. Excuse me, I hate this sneezing, but I can't help it, so forgive me. So evolution is happening, but it's mentonia which helps us to see that and to be participants, not just people who see it, spectators, participants. And that's particularly true of us, that we of the older generation can still see with new eyes and see as Jesus or God sees it. Okay, now the gospel. The gospel is a very evolutionary story, and very evolutionary. It continues on with the theme of last week, which is the resurrection of Jesus. And you remember I said, Jesus didn't walk out of the tomb the same way he was carried into it. No, he didn't. He came out as light. The metamorphosis, if you will, of Jesus from a human body to the Christ body, which is light. Christ, the light of the world. And so, if you had been there on Resurrection Sunday, you would have seen this glorious, beautiful light coming forth from the grave. But you wouldn't have seen the body of Jesus resuscitated. It's not resuscitation, it's resurrection. It's like a butterfly coming out of a I don't know what you call it, but it morphs out of it. And so you've got a new thing, or a chicken morphs out of an egg. So ordinarily you'd not expect to see an egg with a chicken in it. But under the right circumstances, a chicken will break its way out of the shell. Same thing. And so that's what we're talking about here. It's a morphing. It's a morphing into something that's within there, but somehow the old dies and the new comes forth. And that's the resurrection, where Jesus, the Christ, comes forth as a blazing, beautiful, glorious light. Now, we do know, though, that Jesus did appear to the apostles. We call it a glorified body. Somehow, Jesus was able to slow his energy down and become matter and a body, a physical body, but they didn't recognize him. Keep in mind, Mary Magdalene didn't recognize Jesus. The people on the road to Emmaus didn't recognize Jesus. When Jesus was cooking breakfast on the shore, Peter and the apostles didn't recognize him. So, the glorified body is still somehow different than the physical body that we wear during our lifetime. So here's the gospel. They're in the upper room, and Jesus appears in their midst. And he says, rejoice. They rejoiced when they saw the Lord. And he said, peace be with you. In other words, don't be afraid. And he gave them the mission. He said, I send you. Go and tell people about me in my way. And then, of course, we have Thomas. Now, Thomas wasn't with them, and as you know, he's been characterized by calling him Doubting Thomas. Well, he's not so much a doubter, he's realistic. He knows that seeing is believing, and he wants to see. So, he's a different way of looking at things, you say. But then when Jesus invites him to put his finger in his side and to touch his side, Thomas says, my Lord and my God. Again, he has that moment of mentonia where he rises up in consciousness and he sees what he couldn't see before. And now he sees Jesus as God sees him. And that's Thomas. Now, in preparation for today, I was reading our local newspaper. And it's a story of 5 area students who go to Canada-wide science fair. And I couldn't help but think, one is a grade 7 student at St. Catherine's School here in Peterborough. And she's been doing some scientific work here in the local riverbanks and the lake banks of how oil is affecting life. And she says she wants to go now to the coast and try and see what's happening with the oil that's spilled by boats, ships, and how that's affecting the life on the shore and the life forms that are there. She wants to do that. And then a pair of St. Peter's Secondary School, same thing. They advanced to the Canada-wide science fair for their experiments called Quantitative Study of Microplastics. So here you have a generation of young people who are doing research, unbelievable research. And it just seems to me that they're probably, given I'm 90, they're probably the great-grandchildren of people my age. 3 generations. But their interest in school and their curriculum has advanced immensely since I was there. I think I told you the story that when I was there, in our chemistry, the teacher taught us how to make gunpowder. Well, me and my buddy Don thought this was wonderful. And when he wasn't looking, during each class for 2 or 3 weeks, we made gunpowder, put it in one of those glass tubes with a big bulb at the bottom and the longest neck, stuck a cork in it, pointed it out the window. The window was open, and heated it up, and bingo, our classmates on the other side would duck. The cork would go over their heads and outside in the lawn. And we were having a great time until one day, either we put too much gunpowder in the glass, or we put the cork in too tight. Anyway, when we heated it up, it simply blew up. It exploded. And I looked at my buddy, and his face looked like a pincushion. Glass hit him everywhere, little spots. I wasn't hit at all. And the teacher turned and said, "What was that?" He was shocked. And you know something? We didn't see that teacher for a week. He was traumatized by that explosion. So that was the sense of my experiment with science. And I see how far ahead the children are, how they have evolved. They're taking off where their parents leave off. And there you have evolution. The article in the paper, a papal message of understanding. And Rosemary writes about what happened at the Vatican with our indigenous people visiting, and how the Pope heard them. He listened. And in hearing them, he heard their pain. He felt their pain. And he apologized. He really did. A sincere apology. And how that should help. Now, he has a raised consciousness. He has a mentonia. He has raised his level of consciousness to see as God sees. Good example. On Good Friday, for the Station of the Cross, he had a Ukraine woman and a Russian woman together carry the cross. And while he has spoken about the war in the Ukraine, he's never judged or condemned anybody, because he's able to see as God sees, that the Ukrainian people and the Russian people are all his beloved. That's God. And a lot of people who don't have that mentonia, raised consciousness, they don't see it. They see it as the good Ukrainians and the bad Russians. And that's one way of looking at it, and we understand that. But there's another way, and that's the Pope, who sees the people as God sees them. And it's not that God is condoning any behavior. Of course not. God is there suffering on both sides. Both countries are suffering. Both countries, people are dying, shedding their blood. And God is there in the suffering and the fears and anxiety of the people of both countries. And so that's what the Pope sees. That's what the Pope is, because he has that mentonia. He's been able to change his world view and able to see that both the Ukrainian people and the Russian people are God's beloved. And he doesn't judge and condemn the Russian, because he sees differently. And so I just say that today because it's critical for us that we are able to, like the Pope, mentonia, to really change our mind so we see the world differently. We see the world as God sees it. And that's not the same as the way humans see it. Not at all. Not at all. And it's an enlightenment. It's an experience of evolution, consciousness raising. So we see it as God sees it. And that makes a big difference on our response to a situation. And so, and the same with those young students, grade 7 and St. Peter's Secondary, their experience of, like their level of consciousness, their mentonia, their way of seeing the world is a radically different than the way I saw it when I was in grade 7 or in high school. You know, I thought making gunpowder was a big conscious raising thing. Well, when I look back now, I realize that no, it may have been in the day, but today it's not. It's what those young people are doing. And hundreds of them others across the world have been awakened. They've been awakened to a new way of looking at the world, at the people, at the life, all living creatures, at creation and nature. There's a whole different way of looking at it. A raising of consciousness. A raising of consciousness. And evolution is happening. When we see another generation, 2 or 3 behind us, seeing the world differently and carrying out different kind of experiments, we know and we see that evolution is indeed happening in our time. It is happening. And that's really important, that we as Christians enter into the Christ event of Easter, of the celebration of Easter. Now, we experience the enlightenment that Jesus did, that Christ did, and the raising of our consciousness, our mentonia, the changing of our mind, to see the world as God sees it. And once we see the world the way God sees it, then how we live in the world is going to be quite different. We'll see, for example, as Pope Francis did, he sees the Ukraine people and the Russian people as God's beloved, both. And God is there in the suffering, so it's not as if he's favoring one group over the other. No, he's not. She's not. And so that's what I think today we need to sit back and ask ourselves, are we in fact evolving? Have we evolved? Have we experienced mentonia? In other words, has our mind changed enough that we see the world and all life on the planet Earth? Do we see it as God sees it? That's our goal. That is our goal. And somehow that's our spirituality, which brings about that growth and transformation within us. So we can see where it's moving in the very young people and be grateful to be able to see that. But then how about myself? How about us? How about the we? Are we in this time and place really evolving? Is our mind opening up to see much differently? And in seeing much differently, we see the world as God sees it. So when we talk and act, it'll be different from the way that the ordinary people of the world talk and act. Just as Francis had a Ukraine woman and a Russian woman carry the cross together for reconciliation, for healing, for seeing how we can come together and not do violence. Powerful. But if you don't have the new eyes, you'll see it as something that you're scandalized that Pope Francis would include a Russian woman with a Ukraine woman in the carrying of the cross. God bless.